We're here with Tal Oppenheimer. She is the Director of Product Management on the Google Learn team. Welcome to Edtech Insiders.
Thank you, thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so first off, we are here at the Google DeepMind office in London. It's an absolutely incredible event with amazing people and learning all about what Google is doing and what the ecosystem looks like at large. Tell us a little bit about what Google has been doing in the Learn space. It's been really innovative and very wide-reaching.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear it. We've been hard at work across many, many different teams at Google to really focus on how we can help students, but also everyone just learn more effectively. And we try to do this based really deeply on kind of learning principles across the board. We have kind of a deep pedagogy team with a lot of expertise, but we also think about, for everything we build, how do we not only take those learning principles, but how do we also assess their effectiveness in helping actually kind of drive those learning outcomes. And we do that across so many of Google's products because we know many different products are used for a lot of different learning journeys across the board.
Yeah, so we've covered how LearnLM, the model for learning, was incorporated into Core Gemini.
Yep.
There are also these learning benchmarks that you measure different features across. Can you tell us about that approach? It's a really interesting one.
Yeah, so across the board we have kind of both like foundational benchmarks that we look at from a model level, but we also, for every new feature that we build, we think about, what is this feature specifically trying to help with? What are the specific journeys that we try to help with, a set of queries that we specifically try to support? For example, a homework query that's trying to help with math needs a very different set of responses and support than a more kind of open-ended, maybe history question or learning experience. And we want to make sure that our products can work across all of those things. And so, the classic, especially in the world of LLMs, you build your eval set and your query set, but you also want to make sure that you're assessing that not only on kind of quality of answer in terms of user perception or human perception, but also effectiveness on actually teaching you the concept that you came to the products for. And so we very much look at both, which is one of the reasons that I love working in learning, is that it has this kind of overlap of like truly helping students and any really learner around the world, but also making sure that we do so in a way that's helping them grow as a learner and thinker.
Yeah, and the pedagogical effectiveness sort of comes in 5 flavors at Google. You've sort of identified 5 learning science principles that everything is measured across, the curiosity and active learning. As you develop different features, are there sort of different mixes of the pedagogical principles you focus on?
It's both different features, but also for a single sort of student or learner, it also really depends on kind of where in their learning journey are they, right? If they're very much kind of first being introduced to a subject, you may not want to jump into like the very deep active learning experience that's answering all the details. You sort of need to have that kind of overview and that introduction. And then kind of as people progress, really thinking about how do you help them go deeper. And that's where, depending on the subject, active learning, again, to use kind of the math example, needs a very different set of tools and capabilities than what an active learning experience might look like, about how you bring, actually a novel to life or some of those areas and really make it kind of engaging and exciting across the board.
Exactly.
And what's really amazing is that the models are just getting so good at so many of these aspects that you really have this opportunity to create a kind of multimodal learning experience that's not just multimodal but also personalized. And I know you got to maybe see some of the Learn Your Way demos and those things. And we look at kind of how we can bring a lot of those pieces in.
Yeah, and Learn Your Way is one of the newest Google products, and it's basically personalized textbooks coming out of the Google research team, where people can decide you tell the system their interests, and the textbook adapts, even the illustrations adapt. It's a really interesting product.
Yeah, and looking at kind of grade level and otherwise to make sure that the content is understandable and accessible for what you specifically need.
Yeah, it levels it to there's a learning level and to interest. It's a really interesting model. You mentioned the sort of iterative nature, and this is something I think is really interesting compared to traditional search, right? Is that the first thing you ask an LLM in a learning, even in a single learning session, might be very different than the 6th and 7th and 8th thing.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation. And from a UX perspective, that's a different thing to design for. You're designing for long term. You're designing for consistent experience for people coming in and out. You run the UXR team for the team. I'm curious how that looks in terms of the interfaces that you build, how you're building interfaces where it's not transactional, just give and take. It's settling down for a dialogue and a conversation and really trying to learn together. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's fascinating because we also have very different variations of even that experience across our products, right? What you might have in Notebook LM for how you design such an experience where you're grounded in a certain specific set of content can look very different than what you maybe have in Gemini, where sometimes it's grounded in content and sometimes it's much more open-ended, and so you need that flexibility. I think in general it's a mix of pieces, right? One key element is as kind of an end learner, a lot of the input tends to be very text-based, which is very different than other products, which, it used to be click-based, whether it's a touchscreen or with your mouse, or even kind of image upload based. And right now you have the opportunity for all of those, but we do see that most people are typing or voice dictating or kind of speaking, but tends to be text heavy. And this means that there is kind of a lot of different steps that need to happen, right? There's everything from obviously understanding the user and things that the models have gotten very, very good at, but also sometimes knowing when to disambiguate and knowing when to suggest that maybe a different form factor may be a better fit, maybe a quiz or a flashcard, which is not a text-based response. It's actually a very interactive response, maybe the better fit. And with all of these, one of the key kind of UX challenges that we have is also discoverability. To some extent, you have products that can do so much, but that also means it can be really hard to learn everything it can do. To some extent, you can never quite learn truly everything it can do because it's also constantly getting better. And so how do we help bring those, bridge that gap and help folks understand what's possible, but still keep kind of any learner in control of the experience that they need and want across the board. And you see that we kind of approach that differently in different products. So, for example, LM starts with you first and foremost upload content that's relevant, and we see that resonating really strongly with learners because usually you have something you're trying to learn. And kind of starting with that is very helpful. And we also have integrations with Google Classroom that allows a teacher to put relevant content in. So that they can distribute that to their whole class, so they can all have the relevant material to study. But you also have that studio panel on the right hand side that can help you create that video overview or that audio overview to get that breadth.
Mind maps
That lets you kind of start to go sooner. Yes, flashcards and quizzes. Just rolling out on mobile as well.
Amazing.
That flashcards in your pocket piece. And you see that actually that combination of both a chat interface and some of those kind of very visible building blocks is also very helpful, both for individuals who are learning on their own or in that classroom setting, or even as a student who's maybe creating that study guide to share with other students in their class. And so it's been very fun to get to actually work on learning across all of these products, and both with our UX research team go really deep on what the foundational user needs are and how we bring together learning science to make sure our solutions are actually solving those things, with how that manifests in all these different products across the board, right? YouTube has a very different set of ways that we can assist with learning on kind of video-based experiences as well.
Interesting model here about the YouTube TED Ed. They're doing an interesting thing with YouTube for music education. You can actually embed interactives inside the video and be
and so how do you create active learning experiences on video, which is a very engaging medium, but it's actually a very lean back medium.
Passive.
And can be very hard to actually fully retain from.
So I want to double click on two of the aspects of it. One is the multimodal. This idea of, you mentioned that text-based input, text or voice-based input is the norm right now. We have a sort of theory at Edtech Insiders that things are going to get more and more multimodal, just as the internet became more and more multimodal. And it's not that comfortable for many young people to use extended text, right? To write a whole paragraph about what you want and give all the details. It's actually not something a lot of people know how to do. I'm curious how you see both the input and the output. We know that video overviews, the output can be multimodal. Do you see more multimodal input?
Absolutely. I think we already see some of this, right, especially for kind of mobile applications, whether it's of Gemini or LM, right, in the student or in the classroom, right? You get assignments. They're still often on physical paper. You're still reading physical textbooks, and you don't want to type in that math problem. That's very hard to do, and a photo is very fast. And so we already see that in terms of photos. We also start to see that as a lot of classrooms have become more digital, especially after the pandemic and how they actually distribute some of their content. We also see video content being kind of classwork and otherwise as well. And so we see kind of all of those start to be inputs. And I think one of the things that we can do to help is, one, make it a lot easier to bring those multimodal inputs in, but also realize that it's rarely you're only using images, you're only using video, or you're only using text or voice, right? It's actually most often that even in a particular journey, maybe using all of the above. And so how do we allow for that flexibility throughout the experience? And definitely on the consumption side, and actually even more so on the consumption side, rarely is one media the optimal for the entire conversation, right? Video overviews can be great for an overview, but images, then you need
podcasts, videos, slides.
And what becomes amazing with generative AI is it's not even limited to some of the main concepts we usually think of when we think of media, right? Video, images, text, voice, but you actually can use code generation, right? Like flashcards and quizzes. You have Canvas in Gemini.
That's true.
Right, that you can actually kind of have these experiences across the
Yeah,
board.
the output could be a quizzing machine, or it could be an interactive, interactive code-based module where you actually do a simulation.
Exactly, or students can even, ask to create something within
Right.
Gemini, kind of through Canvas and simulate that directly.
Very exciting and powerful.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to double click on, and something that's come up a lot at this conference, is multiplayer mode. Is the idea of starting to get to more social learning. I think
Yeah.
we've already started to really go down that road of the paradigm of students go really deep with AI in this sort of back and forth conversation. I'm hearing a lot here about students working with each other, or teachers and students working together with AI as a facilitator. I'm curious how Google thinks about it. I haven't seen a lot of products in that sense yet, but there are some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's generally an area I think we feel very strongly, and I feel very strongly that learning is fundamentally a social experience. And our goal in general, how we approach a lot of these technologies, is about how do we help make people be the best version of themselves, the best learners possible, both students and teachers in the mix, and we very much want to actually make the human interactions that are part of learning easier and more frequent.
Yes.
We very much believe that you still need that human connection across the board for many reasons. Motivation, true learning, there's also a lot of social skills that develop there, many reasons.
Yeah.
But I think that there's more we can do in the product to actually enable that. We start to see it with some of the abilities to create multimodal output, for example, and then you do have whether it's a teacher or a student kind of creating those objects that then become learning products themselves for everyone else. That can be, it can be used in a social piece, but there's a lot more that we can do to kind of make that even easier, right? I'd say things like our classroom integrations for some of our products start to allow that more specifically for the teacher-student relationship in particular, trying to take the burden off of a teacher from having to make a version of this for every student, make one, help distribute it. They can still get the personalized experience as a recipient. But I think there's a lot more that we can do. It feels like it's amazing how amazing the technology already is with how new it already is, and how much more there is to still explore and truly deliver to help our learners.
Yeah, I think there's a potential for sort of a jigsaw model where students are working on different parts of a problem, creating artifacts, and then sharing with each other, and suddenly you have this class created artifact.
There's so many use cases from that actually across all learning journeys, not just sometimes people think of a group project as a very kind of clear-cut one where you're trying to deliver something together. Yeah. But it's also very true, studying is almost always actually a social experience in many settings, and even homework, especially in higher education, where those problems are hard.
The study group in the library doing the problem set together is a very normal piece of higher ed, and AI could play a really interesting role sort of facilitating and supporting that kind of
And
group.
we even have some earlier explorations in kind of Google research and otherwise around kind of how do we also help people learn to collaborate and work better.
Yeah. Okay, that was incredibly interesting stuff. I mean, when you walk around the floor here, you just see all of the different places that Google is playing in AI, and it is just so exciting. The reading piece, are you involved in that? Yeah, tell us about the Google Early Reading, because that is a really interesting, and it sort of feels like an outlier in some ways because it's so specific to a particular subject.
Yeah, so there's a couple elements that we've looked at here. We both look at kind of early reading, so there's products like Read Along that have been available and are also now integrated into Classroom, which really focus on how we can help with kind of early reading acquisition. And to a largest extent, right, the ability to read and consume content unlocks so many more kind of learning capabilities that are pretty key. And so we've really Google has actually been focused on that for quite some time, and helping do that at scale in a way that's truly accessible, but also hopefully fun and engaging. And this is some of the areas where generative AI can really help in terms of making sure that the story that one kid might be very motivated to read might be very different than the story another kid's motivated to read, and actually you can still help them learn to read at their desired level across the board in those areas. But we've also been starting to explore how we can actually help at even kind of more senior levels, where reading is actually still, and critical thinking about things you read is just as important, if not more so than it used to be, and is still a something for people to continue to learn. And how can you make that easier and more fun and more accessible across the board? And so we have kind of Learn About also has an experience where you can kind of now upload a PDF and get a bit of an experience on top of that to actually how you can engage with the content, and starts to bring in some of those multimodal aspects. But because it's targeting a little bit of an older audience, allows you to actually specify, key areas that you're looking to dig into. Think like themes in a literature assignment you might get. that you want to kind of explore more deeply in the reading.
And that we have a literacy problem in the U.S. that is very deep. It's not just for early learners at all. You have very, very high levels of functional illiteracy in the U.S. and around the world, and it's interesting to see that Google's going into it directly, just because many of your tools are content agnostic. They're really about students upload their own content. It could be high school biology, it could be college astronomy, it could be anything. But the reading space is an interesting one for the space. It's interesting for Google as well.
Yeah, and we generally always at Google try to go both broad to make sure that we can solve big problems, but we also know within that breadth we want to be able to solve the real problems that our learners have. And so we often find that we explore them at both altitudes, and then think about kind of how do we bring them together so that folks can don't have to try to map between all these corners and edges and actually get what they need, but how do we make sure we're really solving that specific problem very deeply?
Especially a problem like reading that unlocks everything
that unlocks
else,
so many other things. Yeah.
So last question for you is about working with schools and working with districts. So Google Classroom is already, and Chromebooks are absolutely ubiquitous in the U.S. education system and around the world. You're creating all of these sort of really interesting, semi-experimental or new features, but then it's all on this sort of classroom infrastructure, at least has the potential to be in this classroom infrastructure. I'm curious, as the director of product, how you're thinking about how all the pieces come together and sort of, you have this amazing delivery mechanism, which very few people have, to actually get things in schools at scale. How do you think about it?
Yeah, so we generally think about both. We try to build all of our products in a way that they can help kind of any learner who's trying to access them directly, because we think it's very important to make sure all of these tools are accessible. I think in a classroom, there's a couple elements here. Like first and foremost, when we're developing products, we want to learn from all aspects of the learning and academic situation, which means not only the students, but also the teachers. And in certain areas, depending on kind of the age, you may also, want to get parents' feedback or otherwise, or departments of education and things. And I do think with how nascent the technology is and how much it can really make education much more accessible and effective across the world, it is really important to do so with the community that's most impacted by it. And so we do work very closely. In general, I see Classroom as one particular way that we can help create experiences that are even more powerful if you have a teacher in the loop. But we really think about this as just one way to access our products, and a way that, if you do have a teacher on Classroom, they can set up that notebook from the start.
Right.
But actually, any teacher can access kind of Notebook LM today and create that and share it with their students across the board. And that's very intentional.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that both of those things are accessible. And of course, if you're in the classroom setting, there are other management benefits that you have that can kind of help in that experience. And so we mostly see it as like a yes and, right?
Yeah.
We want to help. We know that in a kind of institution setting, there's a different set of needs, and we want to make sure we can meet those needs directly, both for teachers, for administrators, and for students across the board. But we also want to make sure that the access doesn't change.
Right, that even if you're not a Google Classroom school, or if you're a learner working outside the traditional system, you can still access.
Yeah, and we feel very strongly that everyone's a learner, everyone can be a learner, regardless of their age, right? Academic learning is one that we're very deeply focused on because of just how critical and fundamental it is always, but especially at this particular point in time with the technology.
Huge. But
we really try to build it in a way that whether you're learning for work or you're learning for life or just curiosity, that these products can still really help you.
Yeah, and that individual sort of, I don't want to call it a consumer use case, but the individualized use case. So it could be a learner of any age trying to come in and learn something new, either for work purposes or curiosity, versus the institutional use case. I feel like this is another theme I've seen a lot at the conference here, because they're the sort of learner. There's institutional first products like Classroom, and then individual first products, but you're obviously deciding to not choose to allow things to work in both contexts.
Yeah, we think about them as how can they scale across both, because even in an institution setting, you do have a learner in the experience, and you want to make sure that it's great for them, but you also want to make sure that it's great for every other player in that situation, because we really do want to make it easier for everyone. And if you need to think about the teacher and the administrator in those situations across the board. And if it's a last mile only consideration, you end up with different products that still can be a little bit rough on the edges. And so we do work very kind of closely also with our classroom team at Google.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This is
and
really
thank
interesting.
you for being here.
Oh no, I'm honored to be here. This is Tal Oppenheimer. She's the director of product management for the Google Learn team, the LearnX team.
Yes, working across learning and Google Labs.
Learning in Google Labs. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you very much.